Hello, lovers, and welcome to Velvet Tales of Love and Longing, where love gets real and the stories hit deep. If you're a hopeless romantic searching for passion, heartbreak, and that undeniable chemistry that makes you believe in second chances, you found your spot. But before we dive in, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It keeps the love alive and lets these stories reach more hearts. So, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into the twists and turns of love because every heartbeat tells a story. And tonight, it's one you won't forget.
Let it go, close your eyes, relax and just let me hold you. Candles, let me light that fire, lay with you under the covers. Yeah, I know tomorrow's coming fast, they can't take this moment, never. Every touch is gonna make it last. I wanna make this night live forever.
This moment felt sharp, like the knife of truth was lodged in his ribcage, and he had to lean into the pain just to sort through the confusion. As he approached her door, his hands shook as he reached up to knock. The door creaked open just enough for Keisha to peek out, her smile cautious but genuine. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you tonight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Neither was I," Cameron murmured, stepping inside. The door clicked shut behind him, and silence settled between them, thick and loaded. "I need to talk to you," he began, careful and steady. "And I don't want this to come out wrong, so I'm just going to say it." Keisha crossed her arms, bracing. "Okay." He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. That knife of truth twisted deeper as the moment of confession drew closer. "Yesterday felt good, real, like we were finally moving forward. But today, I couldn't shake this heaviness. Like there was something said I shouldn't be overlooking." Keisha's eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly are you saying?" "I talked to my sister. I didn't mean to, but she picked up on my energy. I told her the truth, that you've been through a lot, and that I've been trying to love you through it. So she told you to walk away from me." Keisha's tone sharpened, clipped with irritation. "No. She told me to protect my peace. And speaking as a woman, she said Andre is brought up a lot more than he should be." Keisha flinched like she'd been slapped. "Of course she did." "Keisha, you brought it up," she snapped, "which means some part of you agrees with her." "That's not fair," Cameron said, his voice low but firm. "I said it stirred up fears I was already having, stuff I didn't want to admit out loud." Keisha's arms stayed locked across her chest. "I've been here before. Family members always have something to say. Hell, even my people were gossiping about you using me. But that shouldn't overpower how we feel about each other. Andre let his family run our situation, and I'm not doing that again. Not even for you." "I hear you," he said gently, "but I'm not Andre. And Talia is not his mom or his sisters. She's my sister, and her fears are valid." "Which of her fears are valid?" Her voice rose, trembling with hurt. "That I'm going to bring him up? He was the only other man I ever loved. We were married. We had kids, a family. And I'm broken because I'm still affected?" "No," Cameron said softly. "She thinks you're in survival mode. That one emotional trigger could make you run." Keisha's shoulders slumped. She's not wrong. The honesty hit him hard. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. She sat beside him, her voice more tender now. "But I told you, I don't want to live in that mindset anymore, Cameron. I really don't. but it's hard to turn off because it's protected me from other men like Andre. And when your people start questioning me, it makes me feel like I'm just some woman with baggage trying to prove I'm worthy of love. That's not helping. He turned to her, eyes shining. That's not how I see you, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. You're not the only one affected, Keisha. We both have scars. And what happens when my fears clash with yours? She met his gaze, then reached for his hand, pressing it gently against her chest. Cameron, you said you'd fight for me. Baby, I need you to fight now. I need you to see what you want me to see. That just because it happened before doesn't mean it's happening again. I'm still in this, and we've worked hard to build something deeper than what either of us had before. Don't give up now. I'm not giving up, Keisha, he said, voice breaking. But I have to know I'm not just a man picking up the pieces. I need to know your heart is mine. It is, she said, tears in her eyes. It always has been, since the day we met. No man has ever poured into me the way you do. Cameron felt that blade twist deeper in his chest. He knew Keisha loved him, but in that moment, her expectations weighed heavy enough for him to want to run. Because being loved for what you're not isn't the same as being loved for who you are. He swallowed hard. So, do you love me because I give you what Andre couldn't, or do you love me for me? Keisha blinked, stunned. That wasn't what she meant at all. Cameron. Her voice cracked under the weight of everything unsaid. Tell me what you want me to do. You want me to let you go? No, I don't want to walk away. I think we need space. Not to break up, not to cancel anything, just space to think clearly. 30 days. I already reached out to Pastor Greg. I want us to talk to him, get clarity. Her lip trembled. I hate that we're here. Me too. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was full of ache and understanding. Keisha finally whispered, Okay, let's take a break. As long as it's to breathe and not to detach. Cameron nodded slowly. Space, not distance. Just don't shut me out completely, she said, her voice barely audible. I won't. They rose together. Their embrace was long and heavy, like they were holding on to the last piece of something fragile. He kissed her forehead, then turned to leave. As he reached his car, his phone buzzed with a message from Keisha. You fought for me, and I'll fight for us, even when you're unsure. He exhaled deeply, the weight of her words settling onto his chest, but he didn't reply. Not yet. Keisha woke up the next morning with the kind of headache that only comes from crying all night. Ever since the engagement, it felt like their union had been tested and tried. Family gossip, ex drama, triggers. Now his sister wanted to put in her bid for the this won't work train. It felt like they got so close to a resolution only to be pulled back into the conflict again. That kind of whiplash reminded her of Andre, but she acknowledged that Cameron wasn't Andre. And even though her feelings were hurt, she couldn't ignore how many times she had brought Andre up. Still, her head pounded and her heart ached from Cameron's absence. The pain deepened when she realized she wouldn't be waking up to one of his beautiful good morning texts. A knock at the door was followed by Gina's voice calling out before she let herself in. I brought carbs and comfort, Gina announced, nudging the door closed with her foot. Which one you want first? Keisha looked up, her eyes tired but dry. Both, she said. Gina set the food down and dropped onto the couch beside her, peeling open a container of fries and shoving one toward Keisha like a peace offering. So, talk to me, Gina said after a beat. What happened? Keisha didn't answer right away. Her eyes dropped to her lap as she picked up the edge of a napkin. We didn't break up. Just taking a break. for clarity. Gina blinked. Girl, what? After all that progress? Yeah, Keisha whispered. Came over, we talked. He said he felt like he was ignoring things that shouldn't be ignored, that we needed space. 30 days. Then we talked to Pastor Greg. But y'all just made up, Gina exclaimed. Didn't he show up with flowers and all that soft poetic stuff? You said he was present, breathing with you, for God's sake. Keisha gave a small, sad nod. I thought we were past it, but his sister said something that got to him and said I talked about Andre too much or something like that. Gina rolled her eyes hard. So you're not supposed to talk about the man you loved for 15 years? That's ridiculous. Right? But it's not just that. It's how I compare Cameron to Andre. She also told him I'm still in survival mode. That if I ever hit a fight or flight moment, he'd be the one to get hurt, not me. Gina went quiet, choosing her words carefully. Okay, that's not completely untrue, but still, it's not her place to say. And it definitely shouldn't outweigh your voice. I told him that, Keisha said, her voice trembling. I asked why her opinion mattered more than my truth. I've lived through nosy, opinionated family before. I won't go back to that. What did he say? He said it already bothered him, that it wasn't just her voice. So we agreed to take a break. He said it wasn't goodbye, just air. Keisha laughed bitterly. But it feels like rejection again. Gina reached out and pulled her into a hug. Keisha melted into it, letting herself rest for just a moment. This could be good for you both, Gina said gently. Maybe you do have some healing left. You don't want another unsure man pushing through. You want an intentional man working through with you. If this space gives Cameron time to decide which one he is for you, let him. I know, Keisha whispered, pulling back, but it still hurts. Gina didn't argue. The truth was, healing didn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it felt like breaking in new ways. And even with a man who showed up, who breathed through the chaos with her, there were still shadows to wrestle with. Even healing hurts sometimes, Gina said, handing her the tray of chow mein and a fork. Keisha nodded, letting the words settle as she grabbed the tray and began eating her fillings. Maybe she needed the pause too, not because she wanted distance, but because she needed to be with herself long enough to know if she felt safe removing the armor for Cameron when he came back. The first few days felt hollow. Cameron kept the house quiet on purpose. No playlists, no TV humming in the background. He needed silence to hear himself think. But even in the silence, he found himself checking Instagram for the memes Keisha used to send during her sleepless nights. He'd reach for her during his favorite shows only to touch the cold cushions instead of her warm legs. He missed the smell of her perfume on the passenger seat during their lunch break dates on Wednesdays. And he broke down the moment he realized he needed a hug after hearing bad news about his grandmother's health. Despite all of that, he couldn't pinpoint to one specific reason he missed her. He just did. He missed her essence, her energy, the way she could make him smile with a single look. He hadn't realized how deeply she'd woven herself into the rhythm of his life until she wasn't in it anymore. At night, he'd stare at the ceiling, her messages still unread in his inbox. You fought for me and I'll fight for us, even when you're unsure. He hadn't replied, for fear of being prematurely pulled back into her warmth. Her words were sure and comforting, but he couldn't afford to let them drown out his own intuition. Still, he questioned whether his fear was justified or if he was just scared of being loved that deeply in the first place. He met with Pastor Greg like he promised, determined to make this space meaningful and not an excuse to withdraw. I told her I wanted to make sure this was best for the both of us, Cameron said. Pastor Greg nodded slowly. And do you want it to be? I do, but I'm scared my trauma is showing up as protection. I'm starting to confuse caution with avoidance. They talked for nearly 2 hours about Lisa, about his father's absence, and about how Cameron coped by carrying everything alone until it crushed him. Afterward, he spent more time journaling, something Keisha had encouraged months ago. He wrote the things he never said out loud, like how seeing her with Andre during school drop offs stirred something ugly in him. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't fully believe someone like her could choose someone like him without some emotional strings still tied to the past. And then there was Talia. Her warning echoed more now than it had in the moment. Keisha is still in survival mode. If she ever hits fight or flight again, you're the one who'll bleed. Cameron wanted to believe Keisha would fight for him, but part of him kept waiting for her to run. And deeper still, he knew he was running too. Around day 22, he pulled out the poem Keisha had written during their petals and poetry night. It was about how deeply she felt for him, how although he had never seen her naked, she'd bared parts of herself no man had ever touched. He read it twice, then 3 times more. It was raw, intimate, and for the first time in weeks, he let himself feel everything: her vulnerability, her hope, her pain, and then he cried. Not for her, but for himself. Because he was finally realizing he wasn't afraid she'd leave. He was afraid she'd stay, and that he'd mess it up anyway. Keisha never knew quiet could feel like this. It wasn't loneliness, exactly. More like stillness. Like standing in the middle of a room that used to be filled with warmth, trying to remember where everything went. Cameron's absence was everywhere, in the smallest, strangest ways. Lunch breaks felt longer. Work days felt heavier without his reassurance. She missed his voice in her ears, saying things she once only dreamed of hearing. Missed his smile and the way it could brighten her entire day. She didn't just miss him, she missed the feeling of him. His strength, his protection, that quiet, ever present connection that made her feel like one half of something sacred. His presence had become a comfort she didn't realize she relied on. And even though they never made love, he had touched and claimed a part of her no man ever had, the center of her soul. His absence echoed louder than the silence on the phone when she got her promotion and realized she couldn't call him. But she didn't crumble. She still celebrated. She lit candles anyway, played the R&B vinyl he bought her for Valentine's Day, still woke up early, got the kids to school, journaled most nights before bed. It was hard not to text him, especially after a long day, or when her daughter asked if Mr. Cam would be coming back around. But she remembered Gina's words. You don't want another unsure man pushing through. You want an intentional man working through with you. So she gave him space. And in that space, she learned more about herself than she expected. She started running again, remembering how Cameron once said running helped him through dark days. Movement heals, he told her, and he'd always offered her those quiet tools, gentle nudges toward healing disguised as casual conversation. She missed how he listened, really listened. With Andre, she'd learned to shrink her pain into bite sized pieces so he wouldn't feel burdened. But with Cameron, he made space for the whole story, even the parts she couldn't say out loud. Keisha found herself reaching for the things he'd encouraged: drinking more water, reading before bed, holding boundaries with toxic people. His love hadn't just been romantic, it had been restorative. And now that he wasn't around, she could feel the imprint of that love in her daily routine. But the space also forced her to face the hard truths. She still struggled to fully receive love. Every time things got too good, She prepared for heartbreak. That was survival mode. And even if she didn't want to live there anymore, she still checked the exits before entering the building. Toward the end of the 30 days, she reread the letter she'd written but never sent. Notes filled with apologies, longing, and little updates. She never hit send, but she read them all. She had long talks with Gina, who reminded her, a man who sees your wound and still chooses you? That's not common. And Cameron? He sees you. Keisha nodded, but said nothing, because she knew what Gina didn't. That night, when Cameron hesitated, it triggered her survival mode, kicked it into full gear. But she was fighting hard to stop it from taking over, fighting for their love, fighting for him, just like she promised she would, just like she hoped he was fighting too. On the final night, she sat on the porch, looking up at the sky. She whispered into the stillness, I hope you still want this. I really do. And even though she hadn't heard from him in weeks, part of her believed he was whispering the same thing from wherever he was. Cameron's hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual. His palms were dry, but the back of his neck felt damp. The sun had dipped low, casting golden streaks across the windshield as he turned onto the familiar street leading to Pastor Greg's counseling office. It had been exactly 30 days. 30 days of noise and silence, of remembering her laugh mid conversation and then catching himself, of wondering if she still whispered his name when no one else could hear, of rereading her last text more times than he'd ever admit. You fought for me, and I'll fight for us, even when you're unsure. It echoed every time he tried to convince himself that space was the right decision. Now he wasn't so sure. The closer he got to the church building, the heavier everything felt. Like love wrapped in uncertainty. Like walking towards something beautiful, with bruised knees and no armor. He hadn't seen her face since that night. He hadn't heard her voice except in memory. He pulled into the lot and sat there for a moment, watching the glow of the street lamp flicker on. His reflection stared back at him in the rearview mirror, tired, anxious, but ready. Keisha sat in her parked car, watching the entrance. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her journal, the one she brought just in case she needed to write through the moment before it swallowed her whole. She hadn't expected the nerves. She'd spent the last 30 days working on herself, and still, tonight felt like the biggest test of all. Like the future was waiting just beyond those doors, and all she had to do was show up, honestly. She wondered if he'd changed his mind, if space made him realize that her baggage really was too heavy, or worse, that maybe he liked the quiet more than he liked them. She looked down at her outfit. Simple, soft, intentional. Just like the way she wanted to love him. But would that be enough? Just then, she saw a familiar car pull into the lot. Her breath caught. Cameron. He stepped out, closed the door, and paused before walking toward the building. She stayed in her car a second longer, hand over her chest as if she could calm her own heartbeat. Inside the church, Pastor Greg waited quietly in his office, soft jazz humming from the speaker. Two chairs were set across from his desk, angled toward each other. Close, but not too close. Neutral territory for two souls trying to find their way back. Cameron walked in first, eyes scanning the room before settling on the empty chair beside his. He stood behind it instead of sitting. Moments later, Keisha entered. She paused in the doorway, locking eyes with him. For a second, neither moved. There was no embrace, no smile, just eyes that said, I still see you, even through the hurt. She stepped forward slowly, taking her seat. He sat beside her, still, no words, Just two people sitting in the echo of everything unsaid, and in that quiet space, Pastor Greg looked up, smiled gently, and said, "Welcome back. Let's begin." The low hum of jazz faded as Pastor Greg turned the music down and leaned forward, folding his hands. 30 days, he said gently. I know it hasn't been easy. Cameron nodded but stayed quiet. Keisha glanced over at him, then focused on her lap. Pastor Greg gave a soft smile, the kind that didn't rush you but made you feel seen. I'd like to begin not with the relationship, but with each of you. What have you learned in this space apart? Cameron exhaled slowly. That I missed her, even when I didn't think I would. Keisha looked over, surprised at the honesty. I learned that love doesn't fix fear. Cameron continued. It exposes it, and sometimes it confuses the two. Pastor Greg nodded. What was the fear, Cameron? Cameron hesitated. That I was just the bandage. That once she was whole, she wouldn't need me anymore. That I'd be what Andre wasn't, but never really seen for who I am. He looked down, ashamed to admit it out loud. Keisha's voice cracked through the silence. You are seen. Cameron looked at her, eyes glossy. Sometimes it felt like I was just a softer landing after the storm. Like you loved me, but out of relief, not choice. I chose you, Keisha whispered, holding his gaze. Every single time. But I was in survival mode. I know that now. Pastor Greg turned gently to Keisha. And what did you learn during this time? Keisha's breath shook as she answered. That healing is my responsibility. That no matter how good love is, it can't replace the work I have to do in myself. Cameron swallowed hard. I learned that Cameron doesn't just show up for me, he makes me better. He challenged my routines, pushed me to face things I buried, and when he stepped back, I realized how much I leaned on his strength. She paused, voice faltering. But I didn't just wait for him to come back. I journaled, I prayed, I cried, and I kept showing up for myself and my kids because I want to bring a whole woman to this love, not just a woman surviving. Pastor Greg let the weight of her words settle. And now? He asked, voice low and warm. What do you both want now? Not out of fear or habit, but out of desire and clarity. Cameron spoke first. I want us, but not the version built on patching wounds. I want the version where we see each other clearly and choose each other daily, even when it's hard. Keisha nodded, eyes full. I want us too. And I want to keep healing with him beside me, not carrying me, not fixing me, just loving me honestly while I do the work. Pastor Greg smiled. That's a hopeful place to begin. He reached for a folder and pulled out a page. These are the questions we'll explore over the next few sessions about triggers, trust, and the future. But for now, I just want you two to look at each other and tell the truth. Keisha turned to Cameron. Cameron turned to Keisha. A silence passed between them. Not heavy this time, but sacred. I'm still in this, she said, voice thick. Even when I'm unsure, even when I'm scared. Cameron reached out, resting his hand over hers. I'm not here to save you, he said quietly. I'm here to love you and grow beside you. Pastor Gray closed the folder and leaned back with a peaceful nod. Then we're right on time. The rain outside tapped gently against the church windows. Inside, the mood was quieter, more reflective. Keisha sat a little straighter on the couch this time. Cameron's body language was relaxed but guarded, like he came prepared to be honest but unsure how it would land. Pastor Greg adjusted his glasses and looked up from his notes. Today, he said gently, I want us to talk about defensiveness, not as a flaw, but as a shield. Something people use when they don't feel safe, and something that can unintentionally harm the people trying to love them. He looked to Keisha. Are you open to talking about that today? Keisha hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, good. Let's start with you, Cameron. What does her defensiveness feel like to you? Cameron cleared his throat. Like I'm always one wrong sentence away from being shut out. He didn't say it harshly, just truthfully. That after all the work I've put in to show her I'm not Andre, if I say or do something that even looks similar, I get placed in that same box. She starts to feel like I'm controlling or manipulative, and I lose all her respect with one move. Keisha blinked hard, but stayed quiet. I'm not trying to control her, Cameron continued. I just want to understand her. But sometimes it feels like me having feelings makes me the enemy, and that hurts. Pastor Greg turned to Keisha. Do you recognize that pattern? He asked. Keisha bit her lip. Yeah, I do. Where do you think that comes from? She exhaled slowly. I've had to defend myself most of my life. From Andre, from his family, from my own doubts. I got used to always being on guard because I was always being blamed, even when I was the one bleeding. Her voice trembled. So when Cameron brings something up, even if it's valid, it hits that old wound. And I go into defense mode. Not because I don't trust him, but because I still don't fully trust that I'm safe. The room went still with understanding. Cameron reached over, gently rubbing her back. I never want to be another person you have to brace yourself for, he said. I want to be your soft space, but you gotta let me. Keisha looked at him, her eyes shimmering. I want to, I do. But sometimes my mouth moves before my heart gets a chance to explain. Pastor Greg leaned forward. Deep down, do you feel Cameron wants the best for you? Do you feel this is different from your former marriage? Keisha looked surprised by the question. Of course. Cameron is nothing like Andre, not even in the beginning. Pastor Greg leaned back. Then what's the struggle with trust? I was always told not to trust a man, that they'd mess you up and ruin you. Then I met Andre, and that's exactly what happened. So I don't know if I can trust what I see or if I should stay cautious just to stay safe. That's the definition of survival mode, Pastor Greg said with a soft chuckle, placing a reassuring hand on Keisha's leg. Caution doesn't keep you safe any more than holding a gun guarantees you won't get shot. It just keeps people at a distance, but not everyone trying to get close wants to hurt you. Your defenses are keeping Cameron from getting close. If you believe you've done the work to prove he's safe, why keep dragging him through the process? Don't you trust the parts of you that declared him safe in the first place? Keisha struggled to respond because that was exactly it. She didn't trust that soft part of herself, the part that had let Andre in, even through red flags and warnings. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. So, Pastor Greg continued. He turned to both of them. When you feel that heat rising, Keisha, try asking yourself, what's really being said? What does Cameron need from me in this moment? And Cameron, when you sense her getting defensive, instead of reacting, try gently saying, I'm not attacking you. I just want to understand you. They both nodded. I want to challenge you two with something, Pastor Greg added. This week, I want you to talk about something uncomfortable without trying to solve it. Just listen, just hold space, and when the urge to defend or fix it comes, breathe through it. Sit in it. He looked at Keisha. You survived a lot, but you're safe now. And sometimes love isn't about proving anything, it's about allowing. Keisha swallowed, her throat tight. I hear you. And Cameron, he said gently, you're not wrong to want to feel chosen, but that fear of being used as a band aid, that's your work, not hers to constantly disprove. Cameron nodded, voice soft. I understand. The session ended with no grand conclusion, just soft hands, still tangled together, and a shared willingness to try again. The sun was warmer today, and yet there was a noticeable chill in the room. Cameron sat with his shoulders slightly hunched, fingers interlaced tightly in his lap. Keisha noticed. For the first time in a long time, she saw how tired his eyes looked. Pastor Greg, seated across from them, glanced between the two and asked gently, Cameron, how are you doing today? Honestly. Cameron hesitated, then gave a faint smile. I'm good. Pastor Greg raised an eyebrow. All right, let me ask a different way. When was the last time you let Keisha see you hurting? Keisha turned to him slowly, curiosity blooming across her features. Cameron looked down at his hands, twisting his watch. I really don't do that. Why not? Pastor Greg pressed. Calm, but firm. He exhaled. Because she's been through enough. Because she's still healing. Because I thought it was my job to be the strong one. Keisha frowned slightly. But I want to be there for you too. Cameron glanced at her, voice low. You say that, but it's hard to believe when every time I've had a moment of doubt, it's drowned out by yours. Silence fell like a slow-moving tide. I'm not blaming you, he added quickly, but somehow along the way, I stopped letting myself feel anything loudly because I didn't want to add weight to what you were already carrying. Keisha blinked, the realization settling heavy in her chest. And now? Pastor Greg asked. Cameron swallowed.